Every morning at 6 o'clock, without looking at the alarm clock, I open my eyes. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. My body has long since become accustomed to this rhythm, and even on the cloudiest Winchester days, when heavy clouds hang over my little house, making it difficult for light to penetrate through the old curtains, I wake up at exactly 6. My day begins with 3 laps around the garden. Not jogging, of course, at my 78, that would be reckless, but a brisk walk, which Dr. Hawley has allowed me. 20 minutes for health, so he said. Then breakfast is a bowl of oatmeal with a spoonful of honey, which I buy from Mrs. Forrester of the next street over. She claims her bees are the happiest bees in Winchester, so the honey is special. I don't know if that's true, but it's really good. After breakfast, I go out into the garden. My little corner of paradise on the edge of Winchester is the only place where I truly feel alive since I retired. Every bush here, every flower was planted by Esther and me. She's been gone 6 years now, but I still say we when it comes to the garden. Sometimes I think she's still here, among the rose bushes she loved so much. Esther died quietly, in her sleep. We spent almost 50 years together. We've lived in this house since Aldous went to school. Before that, we lived in a tiny apartment closer to the center, saving every penny. But we managed to save up for a down payment, and we moved here. The house was unremarkable. 2 floors, 3 bedrooms, living room, kitchen. But for us, it was a palace. I'm rarely on the 2nd floor now. Too many memories. And my knees aren't what they used to be. I moved the bedroom downstairs to the former study. There's a bed, a nightstand with a lamp, a closet, and a picture of Esther on the wall. She's smiling in it. That's how I remember her. The garden requires a lot of attention, especially now, in the spring. I spend most of the day there, pruning, watering, loosening the soil, pulling weeds. My hands are not as dexterous as they used to be, but the work goes on. Sometimes Mrs. Bennett comes in from across the street and brings cookies for tea. She's 72, a widow, like me, a widower. Many people in the neighborhood think we should get together, but we both know that this chapter of life is closed to us. Pleasant conversations about the weather and grandchildren under the shade of an old apple tree are enough. After lunch, usually soup and a sandwich, I do crossword puzzles from the Times or watch old movies. Sometimes I read, mostly detectives or historical novels. In nice weather, I can walk to the park, sit on a bench, and feed the ducks. That's my whole day, as measured as the ticking of an old clock in the living room. On Wednesdays, I go to my son's house. A bus to downtown, then another one to their neighborhood. Aldous always offers to pick me up by car, but I refuse. As long as I can drive myself, I'll drive myself. It's my little way of maintaining my independence. Aldous is my only son. His mother died when he was only 5 years old. His second marriage to Esther was when he was 7. She accepted him as her own, never differentiated between him and our mutual daughter Mira, who now lives in Australia. Mira calls every Sunday talking about her children, about life in Sydney. I miss her, but I realize she has her own life. Aldous grew up a serious, purposeful boy. He got a good education, became a well-drilling engineer, works in a large company. He has a beautiful house in a good neighborhood, 2 cars, vacation twice a year. By all standards, a successful man. Married to Della 18 years ago, they have 2 children, Noah, 16, Ellie, 14. After Esther died, Aldous took over taking care of my finances. "Dad," he said then, "you think too much about money. Let me handle it. Everything is done online now, through apps. You don't have to worry." I agreed. After all, Aldous had always been good with numbers, and I wanted to spend less time on paperwork and more time in the garden. He arranged for my pension to go directly into an account he controlled himself, and every week he put cash in an envelope on my nightstand for expenses. Admittedly, it was convenient. I trusted my son and was grateful for his help. But sometimes, very rarely, doubt crept in. especially when I'd ask about the state of my accounts and Aldous would reply vaguely, "It's all right, Dad, don't worry." Or, "Inflation, your pension barely covers the bills." That said, my house was long paid off, my utility bills were low, and my pension was quite decent after nearly 40 years of working at the post office. On a recent Wednesday, I arrived at my son's house in time for lunch, as usual. Della opened the door with that polite smile that never reaches the eyes. She was always cold to me. Not rude, no, but not warm either. It was as if I was an inescapable obligation delivered to her along with her husband. "Hello, Mervyn," she said, stepping aside. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." I always felt a little out of place in their house. All that modern stuffed smart speakers that turn on the lights on command, a TV the size of a wall, weird abstract paintings. Della works at an advertising agency and considers herself a person of fine taste. Noah and Ellie sat in the living room, jabbed at their phones. They barely looked up when I walked in. "Hey, Grandpa," Noah mumbled, not taking his eyes off the screen. Ellie just nodded. They used to rush toward me when they were little, hugging me, asking me to show them coin tricks. Now, I'm just an old man who comes in on Wednesdays. Aldous came out of his office with a phone to his ear. He waved at me in greeting and continued the conversation. Something about some numbers, deadlines, and interest rates. I sat down in my chair and waited for everyone to gather around the table. Lunch went as usual. Polite questions about my health, about the garden, a few stories from Della about her job, complaints from the kids about school. Aldous was strangely absent-minded, often glancing over at his wife. After dinner, when Della took the kids away to help with the dishes, I was alone with my son in the living room. "How are you doing, Dad?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Need money for anything?" "No, I'm fine," I replied. "How are my bills? Haven't asked in a while." "Everything's fine," he waved it away. "Pension comes in, bills get paid. Nothing new." I nodded. I didn't insist. I didn't want to seem distrustful. Della came back into the room and said something quietly to Aldous. He nodded and turned to me. "Dad, can you help Noah with his school project? He's doing a model of Old Winchester and he needs details on what the center looked like in your time." This was unexpected. Usually, my grandson tended to minimize communication with me, but I was glad for the opportunity to be useful and spend time with Noah. I got up and went to the kitchen where Della said my grandson was waiting for me. Noah was indeed sitting at the kitchen table with some papers, but he had a look of surprise. "Grandpa, did you want something?" "Your father said you needed help with your Winchester history project." Noah frowned. "I don't have such a project. I'm doing a biology report." I was confused. Why had Aldous lied? Turning to the door, I saw it was ajar and heard excited voices from the living room. "Perfect," Della was saying. "Richmond Hills is the best neighborhood, and this house is a dream." "I know, dear," Aldous replied, "but $770,000 is too much. The bank won't give me a loan like that with my credit history." "There has to be a way," Della insisted. "Think of it. Our own house with a pool and a terrace. We deserve that. All your coworkers already live in houses like that." "I'm working on it." Aldous's voice grew quieter. "I have an idea, but we need to think it through carefully." They fell silent, and I heard footsteps. Stepping quickly away from the door, I pretended I had just come out of the kitchen. Aldous and Della were standing in the hallway with tense faces that were immediately replaced with fake smiles. "Ah, Dad," Aldous said, "have you helped Noah yet?" "There seems to have been a misunderstanding," I replied. "He doesn't have a project on Winchester history." "Oh, really?" Aldous feigned surprise. "I must have gotten something mixed up. Sorry to bother you." For the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the strange feeling. What house were they talking about? And what was Aldous's idea? But most importantly, Why was it necessary to send me out of the room on a made-up pretext? When it was time to leave, Aldous volunteered to give me a ride home. In the car, I asked, "Are you and Della planning to move?" He tensed for a moment, but immediately relaxed. "What makes you say that, Dad?" "I thought I heard something about a new house when I came out of the kitchen." Aldous laughed, but somehow strained. "Oh, that. Yeah, we're just daydreaming out loud. You know how it is. You look at real estate catalogs and imagine what it would be like to live in a big house with a pool. But it's all fantasy, nothing more." I nodded, pretending to believe it. But something told me my son wasn't telling me the whole story. I remembered the figure he'd mentioned, $7,770,000. That's a lot of money. And what he said about his credit history. Aldous had credit problems? He never mentioned it. All the way home we talked about nothing. The weather, my garden, Aldous' job, but it was like there was an invisible wall between us. When we got to my house, he stopped the car and said, "Dad, I have a business trip next week, so we might miss our Wednesday. I'll let you know." "Sure," I replied. "Have a good trip." He looked straight ahead, avoiding my gaze. "And, Dad, if any letters come in from the bank or anything, don't open them. Just put it aside for me, okay? I'll deal with it." "Is something wrong?" I asked. No, it's just, you know how it is with banks. They're always sending some kind of offer, some kind of advertisement. I don't want you to worry about nothing." I nodded, but inside everything clenched with a bad feeling. As I got out of the car and watched Aldous drive away, it suddenly seemed to me that there wasn't just a wall between us, a chasm that was growing wider every day. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time. I kept thinking about the conversation I had overheard, about my son's strange behavior. Something was going on, something he didn't want to tell me. And somehow it had something to do with money. Mine or his, I didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, I felt uneasy that I had entrusted my finances to Aldous unconditionally and without question. It had been 3 weeks since that strange conversation at Aldous' house, and I couldn't help but notice the change in my son's behavior. Usually, he called at least twice a week to see how I was doing, if I needed help with the house or the garden. Now, the phone was silent. Our weekly Wednesday was also canceled, first because of a promised business trip, then because of an urgent project, then simply, "Too busy, Dad, sorry." I didn't want to seem intrusive, so I only called myself once. Della answered the phone, said Aldous was at work and promised he'd call back. He didn't. It was strange and not like our usual routine. I was used to a certain order in my relationship with my son, and the sudden disruption of that order was unsettling. Maybe I had done something wrong, hurt him in some way? I mentally went over our last conversation and couldn't find anything that could have caused this reaction. One day I went to the supermarket and met Mrs. Kingsley, the mother of Noah's classmate. She was the kind of woman who knows everything about everyone and is happy to share information. "Mervyn!" she exclaimed when she saw me in the vegetable department. "What a meeting! How are you doing? You must be very proud of Aldous and Della." "Hello, Helen," I replied, perplexed. "What exactly am I supposed to be proud of?" She rounded her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you knew. Their new house, in Richmond Hills. Robert and I were there last week, helping Della pick out colors for the living room. The place is amazing, the ceilings are so high, and the view of the park is breathtaking." I tried not to show my surprise. "Oh yes, of course. It's just that they've been so busy with the renovations that we haven't been socializing much lately." "Oh, I understand." Mrs. Kingsley nodded. "There's so much work going on. Della said they're completely remodeling the kitchen and bathrooms, and the pool promises to be absolutely marvelous when it's ready. My Robert is even a little jealous." We talked about the weather and the kids some more, then parted ways. I walked home slowly, mulling over what I had heard. So they had bought that house they were talking about after all. A house in Richmond Hills, Winchester's most prestigious neighborhood where bankers, lawyers, and doctors lived, with a pool and a view of the park. When I got home, I called Aldous right away. Again, Della answered, again saying her husband was busy and would call back. I asked her to tell him it was important. By late afternoon, there was still no call, so I decided to call my grandson. Noah answered after the fifth ringtone. "Grandpa? What's wrong?" He sounded surprised in his voice, as if I had never called him before, which wasn't far from the truth, actually. "No big deal, just wanted to see how you were doing. It's been a while." "Ah," he stretched out. "Well, fine, I guess. It's just that everyone's really busy with the move and all." "Moving?" I decided to pretend I didn't know anything. "Well, yeah, we're moving to a new house. Dad didn't mention it?" "Mentioned it in passing, but no details." Noah suddenly perked up. "Grandpa, you have no idea how cool it is. I'll have my own room with a private bath, and Daddy promised to make a play area in the basement, and a real pool in the backyard. None of my friends live in a house with a pool." "Sounds wonderful," I said, trying to make my voice sound happy. "When are you moving in?" "Dad says in a month if the renovations are finished in time. We've already got boxes standing everywhere. Mom's going crazy trying to get everything organized." We talked for a few more minutes, then Noah said he had to go. Some game with friends online. I sat in my living room looking at Esther's picture on the mantel. What would she say now? Probably something wise about the kids being grown and living their own lives. But still, why didn't Aldous tell me about the new house? And where did he get the money to buy one? I've done the math. Aldous makes good money, but not enough to afford a house in Richmond Hills. Della makes a good salary at her agency too, but again, not enough to buy a house like this. And according to an overheard conversation, the son couldn't get a large loan because of credit history issues. Something didn't add up here. The next morning, the mail came. Among the flyers and phone bills, I found an official envelope from Merchant Trust Bank. Usually, all bank documents came to Aldous's email account, and I hadn't received a paper letter of this nature in a long time. I remembered my son's request not to open financial correspondence, but curiosity and anxiety were stronger. Inside was an official notice dated last week. The bank was informing me, Mervyn Trelawney, of a late payment on a mortgage loan in the amount of $770,000. The letter stated that the first payment had been made on time, but that the second, which had expired 10 days ago, had not been received. The bank warned of penalties and possible further penalties if the non-payment continued. I reread the letter 3 times, unable to believe my eyes. A mortgage loan? In my name? $770,000? There must be some mistake. There must be. I'd never taken out a loan like that. I haven't taken out any loans at all since I paid off the mortgage on this house almost 20 years ago. I immediately called Aldous. No answer. I sent a text. "Son, I need to talk to you urgently. Please call me back." No answer. I had all kinds of thoughts going through my head. Could this be some kind of scam? Fraudsters using my data, or a mistake by the bank? But then, why did Aldous ask me not to open bank correspondence? And why isn't he answering his phone? I decided I had to act on my own. I got dressed and drove to the Merchant Trust branch in downtown Winchester. It wasn't my usual bank, and everything inside looked unfamiliar. Glass partitions, fancy chairs, employees in smart suits at their computers. A young woman with the badge Olivia Marshall, loan officer, invited me into a small office for a consultation. I showed her the letter and explained the situation. "Mr. Trelawney," she said, typing something quickly on her keyboard. "Let's check the information in the system. May I see your ID?" I held out my passport to her and she checked the information. "Yes, that's correct." She nodded after a moment. "You do indeed have a mortgage loan open with our bank in the amount of $770,000. The loan was originated," she looked at the screen, "exactly 2 months ago on the 15th of the month." "But I didn't take out that loan," I exclaimed. Olivia frowned. "That's odd. It says here that you were personally present when you signed the documents. We even have a copy of your passport and your signature on all the paperwork. May I see those documents? She nodded, and after a few minutes she handed me a folder with copies of the loan agreement. I slowly looked through the pages, and with each one my heart beat faster and faster. There was indeed my signature on every page, or at least a signature that looked very much like mine. The passport information was mine. The address was mine. But I had never signed those papers. That's not my signature, I said quietly. I mean, it's similar, very similar, but I'm not the one who signed those papers. Olivia looked alarmed. Mr. Trelawney, do you realize what you're saying? If someone forged your signature and got a loan in your name, that's a serious offense. I understand, I nodded, and I don't know who might have done it, but I know for a fact that I never came to your bank and signed those papers. It was a lie. I knew perfectly well who had done it, or at least strongly suspected, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. And what was the loan for? I asked. Olivia looked at the paperwork. To buy real estate, a house in the Richmond Hills neighborhood, Maple Street, number 22. My suspicions were confirmed. The house Mrs. Kingsley was talking about. The house my son and his family were soon to move into. The house bought with a loan taken out in my name without my knowledge. Who owns this house now? I asked, already knowing the answer. Olivia looked at the paperwork. According to our records, the house is registered to Aldous Trelawney, and the loan is in your name. I felt the room swim before my eyes. Aldous, my son, forged my signature, took out a huge loan in my name and bought the house in his name. And now he had stopped paying on that loan. Mr. Trelawney, are you not feeling well? Olivia asked worriedly. No, I'm fine, I replied, though it was far from the truth. Tell me, what happens to this loan now? With the late payment? If the payment is not made within 30 days of the delinquency, the bank will begin collection proceedings. Considering it's been 10 days, you've still got 20 days. And what do you mean by foreclosure proceedings? In your case, since the loan is a mortgage, the bank can begin the foreclosure process. That is, the house will be sold to pay off the debt. In addition, it will seriously affect your credit history. I nodded, trying to comprehend the information. What should I do if I believe the loan was fraudulently arranged? Olivia lowered her voice. In that case, you should file a fraud report with the police. That's a serious charge, Mr. Trelawney. You need to be sure of your word. I thanked her for her help and walked out of the bank. My head was spinning with thoughts and emotions. My own son had deceived me, used my name, my spotless credit history to get money for his dream house, and didn't even bother to tell me about it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he stopped paying on the loan. Why? Was he really planning on just dumping it all on me, make me pay for his ambitions? Or was he hoping to get out of it somehow before I found out? I sat down on a park bench across from the bank, trying to gather my thoughts. What do I do next? Go to the police? Report my own son? Or try to work things out within the family? I called Aldous again. No answer again. I sent another message. I know about the loan. We need to talk. Immediately. No response. So I decided to take a different course of action. I took a cab and drove to the address on the loan documents. 22 Maple Street, Richmond Hills. Richmond Hills lived up to its reputation as an upscale neighborhood. Wide, tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, large houses standing at a respectful distance from each other. The cab stopped in front of a 2-story mansion of light-colored stone with columns at the entrance and large windows. Workers were busy around the house, putting up a fence, digging a hole for a swimming pool in the garden, and people with tools and building materials coming through the open doors. I paid the cab driver and walked slowly toward the house. No one paid attention to me. An elderly man in plain clothes was not interesting among the workers. I went inside through an open door and stopped in a spacious hall with a marble floor and a spiral staircase. The house was luxurious even as it was being renovated. High ceilings, huge windows, expensive materials. "Hey you, what do you want?" shouted a man in a suit, apparently in charge of the work. "I'm looking for Aldous Trelawney," I replied. "This is his house." "Ah, you're here to see Mr. Trelawney," the man nodded. "He's not here right now. He'll be in later. Are you the contractor?" "No, I'm his father." The man smiled and held out his hand. "Oh, nice to meet you, sir. I'm Harry Donovan, the project manager. Your son has chosen a beautiful home. We are doing our best to finish the work by the deadline." "And when are the renovations scheduled to be completed?" I asked. "In 3 weeks if there are no delays in materials. Mrs. Trelawney is really rushing us. She wants to be able to move in before the school year starts." I nodded and said I'd just look around if he didn't mind. Harry allowed it and went back to his business. I walked slowly through the rooms, looking around at my son's future home. A huge living room with a fireplace, a dining room, a kitchen the size of my bedroom and living room combined, a study, 5 bedrooms on the second floor, each with its own bathroom. In the backyard, a barbecue area, a future pool, and a 3-car garage. All this splendor must have cost at least $1 million, if not more. And it was bought with money taken in my name, without my knowledge and consent. $770,000, a sum I couldn't repay even if I sold my house and gave away all my savings. I walked out into the backyard, looking at the workers digging the excavation for the pool. Suddenly, I felt anger like I hadn't felt in years. Aldous hadn't just tricked me, he'd set me up, used me and threw me away. He didn't come and say, "Dad, I need your help." Didn't ask. Just took what he wanted without caring about the consequences for me. And now he stopped paying on the loan. Why? You ran out of money? Or did he think that he could not pay at all? And when the bank starts the collection procedure, all the problems will fall on my shoulders. Anger and frustration overwhelmed me, but I realized that I had to act rationally. First, I had to know my rights and options. The next morning, I opened the phone book and found Wilson and Associates, a law firm near my home. I had never dealt with lawyers, except for the probate process after Esther's death, but the situation called for professional advice. The office was small but neat. 3 offices and a reception area with a receptionist, a young woman who politely offered me coffee while I waited. 15 minutes later, I was invited into the office of Ronald Wilson, an older man with gray hair and an attentive gaze. "What can I do for you, Mr. Trelawney?" he asked as I sat down across from his desk. I told him the whole story, about my son handling my finances, about the accidentally discovered loan, about the house in Richmond Hills. Wilson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in his notebook. "I understand your situation," he said when I finished. "Unfortunately, these cases of financial abuse in families are more common than one might think, especially when elderly parents are involved. What are my options?" I asked. Wilson folded his hands on the table. "You have several avenues. The first is to file a fraud report with the police. This is a serious charge that could lead to criminal prosecution of your son. On the plus side, the bank will likely cancel the loan if it can be proven that you didn't take it out. The minus is the obvious consequences for your son and your relationship with him." I nodded, feeling a heaviness in my chest at the mere thought of my son potentially being sued. "The second option," Wilson continued, "is to file a civil suit. You can challenge the validity of the loan agreement on the grounds that the signature was forged. This is less legally serious for your son, but the process can be protracted and there's no guarantee of success. Banks are very reluctant to admit errors in paperwork." "And the third option?" "The third option is to try to resolve the issue within the family. Talk to your son, explain the situation, demand that he take responsibility and reissue the loan in his name. But to do that, He'll have to prove his solvency to the bank, which, judging by what you say, could be problematic. I wondered. None of the options seemed appealing. What would you advise if you were me? I asked. Wilson sighed. In cases like this, I always advise you to try to resolve the matter peacefully first. Talk to your son. Explain what you know about the loan and offer to make things honestly right with him. If he refuses or continues to avoid communication, then you will have to take more serious measures. I thanked him for his advice and paid for the counseling session. As I left the office, I felt a little more confident. At least now I knew what my options were. Upon returning home, I immediately called Aldous. As expected, he didn't answer. I left a message. Son, I know about the loan and the house. We need to have a serious talk. Please call me back. There was no response that day or the next. I called again and again, but Aldous seemed to vanish into thin air. Even Della stopped answering the phone. On the third day, I decided to do something different. I went to their old house, but no one was there. A neighbor said she'd seen them loading their stuff into the car yesterday. Moving to a new house, she explained. Della's been telling everyone how beautiful it is, and they're planning a housewarming party next weekend. Housewarming? I interjected. Well, yeah, a big party. Della said all of Aldous' co-workers, their friends, some important people from town are invited. They want to make an impression, you know. I nodded, feeling the anger boiling up inside again. They're throwing a party in a house bought in my name with a loan that's already past due, and they didn't even think to invite me. What's more, deliberately avoiding it so I wouldn't find out. At that moment, something broke in me. All doubts and hesitations disappeared. I returned home, took all the documents related to the loan, and went to Ronald Wilson again. I haven't been able to get in touch with my son, I told him. He's been avoiding me, and I learned that they're planning a housewarming party to which, naturally, I'm not invited. Wilson nodded understandingly. In that case, I suppose an amicable solution is not possible. What do you want to do next? I want to file a fraud report and get a court order for eviction, I said firmly. Wilson looked at me carefully. Are you sure? This is a major step that could change your relationship with your son forever. Our relationship had already changed when he decided to use me in this way. The days that followed passed in turmoil. A statement to the police, a deposition, a signature examination that confirmed the forgery, an appeal to the courts. Wilson worked quickly and efficiently. Perhaps the fact that the case was egregious played a role, or maybe the judge simply sympathized with the elderly man who became a victim of financial fraud of his own son. Either way, by Friday, I had in my hands a court order declaring the loan agreement invalid as having been concluded by fraud, as well as a warrant for eviction from the house bought with the money and seizure of property to compensate for the bank's expenses. What now? I asked Wilson as he handed me the papers. Now these papers have to be handed over to the bailiff who will conduct the eviction proceedings. This usually takes time, but given the circumstances, you can speed up the process. Speed it up how much? Well, theoretically, the bailiff can come any time the owners are in the house, even this weekend, if you insist. I thought back to the housewarming party the neighbor had mentioned, about the party where Aldous and Della would brag about their new home to friends and co-workers. Yeah, I said, that's exactly what we'll do. Saturday evening was warm and clear. I sat in Wilson's car in front of the house on Maple Street watching the guests drive up. Men in suits, women in evening gowns, expensive cars, gifts in beautiful packages. The bailiff, Mr. Baxter, waited with us, a large man with a nonchalant face, for whom such situations were part of his daily work. Are you sure you want to do this now? Wilson asked one last time. Why don't we wait for the guests to disperse? I shook my head. No, let everyone see what's going on. Let them know how this luxury was obtained. We got out of the car and headed towards the house. Music and laughter could be heard even through the closed windows. There was a man at the entrance checking invitations, but Mr. Baxter just showed him his ID, and he nervously stepped aside. Inside, the house glowed with lights. Flowers were everywhere. Waiters were serving champagne and hors d'oeuvre, and guests gathered in groups, admiring the interior. The renovation had been completed, and the result was impressive. Expensive furniture, paintings on the walls, crystal chandeliers. Everything screamed wealth and success. We walked through the hall to the main living room, where the most people were. I noticed Aldous at once. He was standing in the center of the room with a glass in his hand, saying something to a group of men who were listening intently. Della was nearby, dazzling in a silver dress, accepting compliments from the guests with a smile. They didn't notice us until Mr. Baxter tapped the metal handle of his briefcase on the table, drawing attention. "Good evening," he said loudly as the room fell silent. "I'm James Baxter, Hampshire County Bailiff. I have a court order for eviction and seizure of property." There was dead silence. All eyes turned to us. I saw Aldous freeze with his mouth open, unable to believe his eyes. Then his gaze shifted from Baxter to me, and recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by horror. "Dad?" he squeezed out. "How did you get here?" I pointed silently at the bailiff. Baxter stepped forward, holding out the papers to Aldous. "Mr. Aldous Trelawney, are you the owner of this house, purchased through a mortgage loan made out in the name of Mervyn Trelawney?" Aldous didn't take the papers, continuing to look at me. "Dad, what's going on?" His voice shook. "You know what's going on," I answered calmly. "You took out a loan in my name without my knowledge, forged my signature, bought this house, and stopped paying on the loan." A whisper drifted through the room. Guests began to glance around, some backing away as if not wanting to be part of the unfolding drama. "Mr. Trelawney," Baxter continued, still holding out the documents to Aldous, "according to the court order, the mortgage agreement has been declared null and void as having been entered into by fraud. The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings. You and your family are ordered to vacate the premises within 7 days." Della, who until that moment had stood in a daze, suddenly came to life. "What?" she exclaimed, coming toward us. "There's some mistake. Aldous, tell them." But Aldous was silent, his face as pale as chalk. He knew he had been caught red-handed. "There is no mistake," I said, looking straight at my son. "You took out a loan for $770,000 in my name, without my authorization, listed the house in your name, and when it came time to pay, you just stopped returning calls from the bank, hoping that all the problems would fall on my shoulders." "Is that true, Aldous?" Della turned to her husband, her voice ringing with tension. Aldous finally came out of his stupor. He straightened, his face taking on a hard expression. "You don't understand, Dad," he said. "I was doing this for the good of the family. I had no choice. The bank wouldn't give me a loan like this because of that old business story, and we needed a house worthy of our position." "And that's why you decided to set me up?" I asked. "I didn't set you up," Aldous objected. "I was going to pay off the entire loan myself. There were just some temporary difficulties at work, and I had to miss a couple of payments. I would have made it up if you hadn't made a circus of it." "Circus?" My voice remained calm, even though everything was boiling inside. "From possibly losing everything I have, do you realize the bank could take my house if I couldn't pay your loan?" The room became completely silent. Even Della was silent, shifting her gaze from me to her husband. "I would have repaid everything," Aldous repeated stubbornly, but his voice didn't sound as confident anymore. "I've always taken care of you, always looked after your finances." "Looked after my finances?" I grinned bitterly. "You mean embezzled my money? You think I didn't realize that my pension should be enough for more than the crumbs you were leaving me?" Aldous opened his mouth to object, but Baxter interrupted him. "Mr. Trelawney, I must complete the procedure. Please accept these papers and acknowledge receipt. Aldous mechanically took the papers. Della beside him looked like she was about to faint. All these people, she whispered, glancing around at the guests, many of whom were already moving slowly toward the exit. My friends, your co-workers, what will they think? They'll have to think your husband is a crook who cheats his own father, I replied. How can you do that? Della exclaimed, her face contorted with rage. You're ruining our lives over some misunderstanding. Aldous has always cared for you, always helped you, and you repay him like this. Misunderstanding? I interjected. Forging a signature, executing false documents, taking out a loan in someone else's name, that's not a misunderstanding, Della. It's a crime. Aldous, who had previously stood with his head down, suddenly stepped forward. Dad, let's talk in private. I'll explain everything. I'm sure we can find a solution. A solution has already been found, I replied, pointing to the papers in his hands. You have a week to vacate the house, and be glad I didn't go further and insist on criminal prosecution. You can't do this to us. Della was on the verge of hysterics. Where are we going to go? What are we going to tell the kids? You still have your old house as far as I know, I pointed out. We sold it to pay the down payment on this one, Della reprimanded. I felt a prick of regret, but quickly suppressed it. I wasn't the one who had created this situation. I wasn't the one making these decisions. Then you'll have to come up with something, I said, like you've always come up with when you want something you can't afford. Aldous took another step toward me, his face contorted with desperation. Dad, please. I swear I'll fix this. I'll find the money. I'll reissue the loan to myself. I'll do whatever I need to do. Just don't do it. Not now. Not like this. I looked at my son, the man I'd raised, the man I trusted, the man I loved against all odds. And I saw no remorse in him, only fear of the consequences, fear of public humiliation, fear of losing the home he could never afford. You've already made your choice, Aldous, I said quietly, when you decided you could use me and my name for your own purposes, when you forged my signature, when you stopped answering the phone, knowing that credit problems would come after me. I turned to Wilson and Baxter. Are we done here? Wilson nodded. Yes, the formalities are complete. Mr. Baxter will be back in a week to supervise the eviction if the house is not vacated voluntarily. I looked one last time at Aldous and Della, standing in the middle of the lavish living room, surrounded by the few remaining guests who were now looking at them with a mixture of pity and judgment. Goodbye, son, I said. I hope this lesson has taught you that you cannot build your happiness on another's misfortune, even if that stranger is your own father. With those words, I turned around and walked out of the house, feeling the stares of everyone present. Behind me, I could hear Della sobbing and some of the guests trying to comfort her. But I didn't turn around. My heart was heavy, but my decision was firm. I knew that this night had changed everything, that there was no turning back, that my son would never forgive me for this public humiliation, just as I couldn't forgive him for the betrayal. But in that moment, I felt only one thing, a strange, bitter relief that I had finally done the right thing by protecting myself, even if the cost was the last thread that connected me to my family. After that night, my life was divided into a before and an after. The silence of the house, which had once seemed cozy and familiar, now pressed down on me. I sat in the chair for hours looking at Esther's picture, as if looking to her for answers to the questions that had been weighing on my mind. Had I done the right thing? Was it too cruel? What would happen to Aldous and his family now? Ronald Wilson called twice, updating me on the progress of the case. The bank had invalidated the loan agreement after a signature examination and a police investigation. The house was seized and had to be sold to cover the expenses already incurred by the bank. Aldous and his family moved out on the third day after the housewarming party, without waiting for the official eviction a week later. Where they had settled, I did not know. Aldous didn't call, didn't write, didn't visit. It was as if a wall had grown between us. But I didn't expect otherwise. I realized that my son would not forgive my public humiliation, just as I could not forgive his betrayal. I received my first call from a family member on the fourth day after the incident. It was my daughter Mira from Australia. "Dad," her voice sounded worried, "what's going on over there?" Della called me, sobbing into the phone, saying something about the house and the loan and how you ruined their lives. I took a deep breath and told Mira the whole story. About the loan, about the forged signature, about the late payments, about the housewarming party. "Oh my God," she exhaled when I was done. "I can't believe Aldous did that. But Dad, maybe we should have handled it some other way. Not in public, not in front of all their friends." "How?" I asked. He'd been avoiding me for weeks, wouldn't return my calls, didn't show up when I asked to see him. What was I supposed to do? "I don't know," Mira admitted. It's just so drastic. And now they're without a house. Noah and Ellie are worried." "They had a house," I reminded her. "The one they used to live in. They sold it to afford something they couldn't afford. It was their choice, not mine." Mira was quiet for a moment, then said quietly, "I understand you, Dad, I really do. It's just, I'm sorry about what happened." We talked some more about her children, about work, about the weather in Sydney. The usual topics that now seemed so insignificant against the backdrop of what had happened. Before saying goodbye, Mira said, "Dad, I was going to fly up for Christmas, but now I don't know. Would it be a good idea? The atmosphere probably won't be festive." "Do as you see fit, dear," I replied, feeling a new wave of bitterness. "I'll understand either way." After talking to Mira, I couldn't sleep for a long time. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. Before, even after Esther's death, I had a family, even if it wasn't the closest, even if we didn't see each other often, but it was there. Now I was all alone, and that thought scared me more than I was willing to admit. The next call, 2 days later, came as a surprise. It was Della. "Mervyn," her voice sounded cold and official. "I'm calling at the request of the kids. They want to talk to you." I felt my heart clench. My grandchildren, whom I love despite their cool attitude toward me in recent years. "Of course," I said. "I'm always happy to talk to them." There was a rustle, then the voice of Ellie, my 14-year-old granddaughter, came through the phone. "Grandpa, is that you?" "Yes, honey. How are you?" "How am I?" Her voice suddenly snapped to a scream. "Are you really asking how I am after what I've done? We're living in a motel. A motel. All my stuff is in boxes. My friends make fun of me at school. How could you do this to us?" I hadn't expected such an onslaught and didn't immediately come up with a response. "Ellie, I understand that you're upset, but your dad—" "My father has taken care of you for years," she interrupted, "and you repaid him like this. You're a mean, cruel old man. I hate you." There was a cry in the receiver, then a rustle again, and Della's voice, "See what you've done? Happy?" Without waiting for my answer, she handed the receiver to Noah. "Grandpa." My grandson's voice sounded muffled, with barely contained rage. "Mom made me talk to you. Said it was important. But I have nothing to say to you. You ruined our family. Dad lost his job. We live in the middle of nowhere. Everyone at school talks about us behind our backs. And it's all because of you." "Noah," I tried to speak calmly, "your father committed a crime. He took out a loan in my name without my knowledge. That's fraud. I realize this is hard for you right now, but he did it for us," Noah shouted, "so we could have a nice house. And you were just jealous. You old, worthless, envious bastard." The tube passed to Della again. "I hope you're satisfied," she said icily. "See what you've done to the children? They're desperate. Aldous lost his job. The company doesn't want to deal with a man accused of fraud. We don't have a house, no money, no future, all because of your petty revenge." "Petty revenge?" I felt a wave of anger rising. Della, your husband cheated me, used my name to get money, forged my signature, and when it came time to pay, he just ignored it, jeopardizing my credit history, my house, everything I own. He was going to pay it all off, Della was almost shouting. He had temporary difficulties, but he would have made it through if you'd given him a chance, if you'd talked to him like a normal person instead of making this circus with the bailiff. I've been trying to talk, I reminded him. For weeks, he avoided me. Because he knew you wouldn't understand, that you'd judge him like you always do. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. Della, I'm sorry about what happened, I really am, but I can't take the blame. I'm not the one who created this situation. You old egomaniac, her voice shook with rage. You've always thought only of yourself, even when Aldous was a child, only about your problems, your job, your money, never about him. And it's the same now. I wish you died instead of Esther. At least she understood what family was. The tube disconnected, leaving me in the deafening silence of my own home. Della's words stung like bees, leaving painful pricks in my heart. Was I really that kind of father? Was I really only thinking of myself? I remembered differently. The sleepless nights with little Aldous when he was sick, the extra shifts at the post office to pay for his schooling, the denial of my own desires so that my son would have everything he needed. But maybe I was missing something? Maybe there was something important missing in my care that made Aldous grow up to be a man capable of doing that to his own father. I had nightmares that night. I saw Lorraine, my first wife, Aldous' mother, who had died of cancer when our son was only 5 years old. She looked at me with disappointment and shook her head. You couldn't do it, Mervyn. You couldn't raise him right. I woke up in a cold sweat and didn't sleep a wink until morning. The memories came in waves. Aldous at 6, crying with loneliness. Aldous at 10, withdrawn and quiet while I worked late into the night. Aldous at 16, distant enough that we hardly spoke anymore. I tried to remember the moment when it all went wrong. When had my son turned into a man capable of deceiving his own father? Was it one particular episode, or a series of small events, each one undermining our bond until it became so fragile it shattered? The following days brought a new wave of calls and visits. My sister Jean, who lived in London and visited infrequently, called to express her support. You did the right thing, Mervyn, she said firmly. Aldous had been out of line for a long time. I've seen the way he's treated you all these years, as if you were a burden, not a father. It was time to teach him a lesson. Her words comforted me a little, but a call soon followed from Cousin Roger, who voiced the exact opposite opinion. Mervyn, how could you? He was indignant. This is your son, your flesh and blood. Is money more important to you than family? It's not about money, I tried to explain. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about basic decency. Decency? Roger snorted. Is it decent to make your own son look like a fraud in front of all his friends and co-workers? Is it decent to deprive your grandchildren of a roof over their heads? There was no use arguing. Roger, like many others, saw the situation one-sidedly. An abusive father punishing his son for a minor offense. $770,000 in credit and forged documents was a minor offense in their eyes. And my unwillingness to be used was callousness and selfishness. The neighbors, too, were divided into two camps. Mrs. Bennet, with whom we often had tea under the apple tree, supported me. You've done the right thing, Mervyn, she said, bringing her specialty cookies to the tea. I'd do the same if I were you. We can't let children sit on our necks, even if they are our children, especially if they are our children. Mr. Parker from across the street now defiantly turned away when he greeted me on my walk. One day I heard him say to his wife loud enough for me to hear, "Here comes the old man who threw his own grandchildren out on the street. A week after the bailiff incident, I had an unexpected visitor, Pastor Gibbons from a local church. I wasn't a particularly religious man and attended services only on major holidays, but I knew and respected the pastor. "Mervyn," he said, sitting in my living room with a cup of tea, "I'm not here to preach or judge, just to talk." "Thank you, Pastor," I replied. Not many people want to just talk to me these days. Mostly, everyone is looking to condemn or defend. The pastor nodded with understanding. "The story with your son has divided the congregation. Some feel you acted too harshly. Others feel you justly punished the guilty party. But few try to understand how you yourself feel." I looked at him gratefully. What do I feel? Honestly, I don't know. Anger, disappointment, bitterness, and at the same time, doubt. Did I do the right thing? Was it too drastic? Have I done more harm than good? Those are natural questions. The pastor nodded. But there's another one you may be avoiding. Are you willing to forgive? I wondered. Forgive Aldous for what he had done, for betraying me, for deceiving me, for being willing to set me up. I don't know, I answered honestly. Right now, no. Maybe in time. But even if I forgive, I'm not sure I'll be able to trust again. The pastor nodded. That's an honest answer, Mervyn. Forgiveness is a complicated process, and it doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't happen. Sometimes forgiveness is needed more by ourselves than by those we forgive. We talked for a long time, and although the pastor didn't give me specific advice or answers, the conversation itself brought relief. Finally, someone listened to me without judgment, without ready-made opinions, just as someone going through a difficult time. When the pastor left, I felt a little better. But in the evening, a severe headache started that wouldn't go away even after pills. I could hardly sleep, and in the morning I found that my right hand was not obeying well. My fingers were numb and did not want to bend. Frightened, I called a cab and went to the hospital. Dr. Reeves examined me and frowned. "Mr. Trelawney, you have high blood pressure, very high. Are you on any medication for hypertension?" I shook my head. "I've never had a problem with blood pressure." "Well, now you have them. The numbness in your arm is a red flag. You may have had a microstroke. You need to be evaluated and treatment started immediately." I spent the next 2 days in the hospital. Tests, MRI, consultations with specialists. The diagnosis was confirmed: a microstroke on the background of severe stress and high blood pressure. I was prescribed a bunch of drugs and strictly forbidden to be nervous. Easier said than done, I thought, returning home with a bag of pills and a sheet of recommendations. There was a surprise waiting for me at home. There was a message on my answering machine from Robert Haley, an old friend of Aldis's from high school, with whom they hadn't spoken in years. "Mr. Trelawney, this is Robert Haley. We saw each other at Aldis's birthday party 3 years ago. I don't know if you remember me. I heard about what happened and would like to meet you. It's important. Please call me back." I was puzzled. Why would Robert, whom I barely knew, want to meet with me? But curiosity got the best of me and I called back. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in downtown Winchester the next day. Robert arrived on time, a tall man in his 50s with early gray in his hair and a serious look in his eyes. "Mr. Trelawney, thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, shaking my hand. "I didn't want to talk on the phone, but there are things you should know." We ordered coffee, and as the waitress stepped away, Robert leaned over to me. "Aldis contacted me 3 days ago. We hadn't spoken in years, but all of a sudden he brought up an old friendship. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "He knows that I serve on the city council, on the social affairs committee, and that I have a certain amount of influence. He asked me to talk to you, to convince you to withdraw the lawsuit, to tell you it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Promise that if you did, he would find a way to pay off the loan himself." I felt my blood pressure rising again. "And what did you say?" I said I'd think about it, but I actually decided to talk to you first. You see, Mr. Trelawney, Aldous and I were really close friends at school. But then, he changed. He became obsessed with money, status, the trappings of success. That's why we split up. I couldn't accept his new values. Robert sipped his coffee and continued. When he called me with this request, I knew right away that he had no remorse, not sorry for what he did. He's just looking for a way to avoid the consequences. And he's using an old friendship to do it, just like he used to use your trust. I sat in silence, pondering what I'd heard. So Aldous isn't resigned, looking for workarounds, trying to pressure through third parties. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. But why? You could have just turned him down and not met with me. Robert looked me straight in the eye. Because I've known Aldous since he was a kid, and I know that if this plan doesn't work, he'll have other plans. He may send someone else to you, pressuring you through grandchildren, through mutual acquaintances. I wanted you to be prepared. After my meeting with Robert, I returned home with a heavy heart. So the battle was not over. Aldous hasn't admitted defeat, hasn't realized his guilt. He's just looking for new ways to manipulate me. And indeed, in the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Suddenly, I got a call from my longtime friend Esther, with whom we had not spoken for several years, and began to convince me to forgive the boy. After all, he did not mean anything wrong. Then came a letter from a former colleague at the post office, who wrote that family is the most important thing, and money is nothing compared to family ties. Even Mrs. Kingsley, the mother of Noah's classmate when she met me at the supermarket, began to convince me that children should not suffer because of their parents' mistakes. All of these people used different words, but the bottom line was the same. I should withdraw the lawsuit, admit that I had overreacted, and make peace with my son. None of them seemed to understand or want to understand the true nature of the problem, not just the loan or the money, but the betrayal of trust. The son's willingness to use his father and put him in harm's way. The pressure was building every day, and I could feel my health deteriorating. The headaches became constant despite medication. My arm would sometimes go numb, especially in the mornings. I hardly slept at night, tormented by anxious thoughts and doubts. But despite all this, I remained firm in my decision, not out of stubbornness or revenge, as many thought, but out of a deep conviction that I had done the right thing, that to give in now, to forgive, to pretend that nothing had happened, would only reinforce Aldous's belief that his father could be treated with impunity. And who knows what he'll come up with next time. One evening, as I sat in the garden watching the sunset and thinking about all that had happened, the phone rang. It was Noah, my grandson. "Grandpa," his voice sounded strained. "Mom doesn't know I'm calling, but I have to talk to you." "Of course, Noah," I replied, surprised by this unexpected call. "I'm always happy to hear from you." "Yeah, I wanted to apologize for what I said last time. I was angry and upset, but now I don't know what to think." "What happened?" I asked, feeling my heart clench with worry. "I overheard my parents talking last night. They were fighting. Mom was yelling at Dad, saying it was all his fault, that he got them into this house venture knowing he couldn't pay the loan. And Dad, he said it would have worked out anyway, that the bank wouldn't have taken your house. At most, he would have ruined your credit history, and you don't need it at your age anyway." I felt the blood drain from my face. So Aldous was deliberately setting me up. Not just taking out a loan without asking, but planning to default on it, knowing the consequences would fall on my shoulders. "Thanks for telling me, Noah," I said quietly. "I appreciate your honesty. Grandfather, I don't know who to believe. Dad says one thing, you say another, but this conversation, it's made me think. Noah, I'm not asking you to choose sides. You love your father, and that's the right thing to do. But sometimes even the ones we love make mistakes, big mistakes, and have to answer for them." We talked some more, and before saying goodbye, Noah said quietly, "I miss you, Grandpa." "I miss you too, my boy," I replied, feeling tears come to my eyes. After this conversation, I sat in the garden for a long time, looking at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. For the first time in these hard weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not reconciliation with Aldous. I knew that our relationship was probably ruined forever, but that the truth mattered, that it could break through the layers of lies and manipulation, and that gave me the strength to hold on, despite the pressure, despite my deteriorating health, despite the loneliness that was now my constant companion. I had made the right choice, and I was willing to bear its consequences no matter how severe they might be. 3 months had passed since the day I showed up at Aldous's housewarming party with the bailiff. 3 months is a short time by the standards of my long life, but those 90 days felt like an eternity. Every morning I woke up with a heaviness in my chest. Every night I fell asleep with thoughts of what had happened and how it had changed my life. The court fully recognized my case. Forensic tests confirmed that the signatures on the loan documents had been forged, and the testimony of bank employees proved that I never showed up at their office to apply for the loan. Aldous was found guilty of fraud, given a suspended sentence and ordered to pay restitution to the bank, a sum he is unlikely to ever collect. The Richmond Hills home was seized and put up for sale. Ronald Wilson, who kept in touch with me throughout the process, reported that because of the rushed sale, the property went for considerably less than market value. The bank suffered a loss, but the most important thing for me was that my name was cleared of unfounded charges and my credit history was restored. I learned about the life of Aldous and his family in a fragmentary way, through mutual acquaintances and casual conversations. After a public scandal and a lawsuit, he was fired from the company where he had worked for 15 years. No one wanted to deal with a man accused of fraud, especially in an industry as conservative as engineering drilling. Della filed for divorce, unable to bear the disgrace, the financial hardship, and the collapse of all hopes for a life of luxury. She took the children and moved in with her parents in Bristol. Noah and Ellie changed schools, started a new life away from Winchester and the memories associated with it. Aldous rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town and tried to find work, but without success. His reputation was ruined, and in our small town where everyone knows everyone, it was practically a verdict. I felt no gloating or satisfaction at the news. It was more like a quiet sadness and regret that things had turned out this way. I did not choose this path. I did not create this situation, but the consequences have been hard on everyone. My life has changed, too. After the microstroke, my health became more fragile. I strictly followed doctors' orders, took medications, monitored my blood pressure. But the main change was not physical. It happened inside. I became a different person, more solid, more determined, a person who had finally learned to set boundaries and protect himself even if it meant being alone. And alone I was. Mira didn't fly out for Christmas, citing ticket problems. I knew it was an excuse. She just didn't want to be caught between two fires, choosing between her brother and her father. The grandchildren didn't call, except for the one time Noah contacted me secretly from his parents. Even some old friends had distanced themselves, finding me too rigid and unapproachable. But in a strange way, this loneliness didn't depress me as much as one might expect. It had its own purity, its own honesty. Better to be alone than surrounded by people who use you, manipulate you, disrespect your boundaries. That morning, exactly 3 months after the incident with the bailiff, I was working in the garden. It was early spring and I was preparing beds for new plantings. The work was unhurried, quiet, almost meditative. The sun was pleasantly warming my back, and I could already feel the breath of the coming warmth in the air. The sound of a car pulling up made me look up. I rarely got visitors lately, so every visit was a surprise. But this visit I hadn't expected at all. Aldous was standing at the gate, gaunt, thin, with a sloppy stubble on his face and a worn jacket that didn't look like his usual business style. He was looking at me with some strange expression, a mixture of anger, despair, and something else I couldn't quite pinpoint. "Hello, son," I said, straightening up and taking off my gardening gloves. He silently opened the wicket gate and stepped into the yard. For a moment we just stood opposite each other, two Trelawneys, bound by blood but separated by a chasm of mutual incomprehension. "May I come in?" he finally asked. I nodded and led him into the house. In the living room, Aldous stopped, looking around as if he were seeing the room for the first time. Maybe it was. When he'd come in recent years, he rarely went further than the hallway, always in a hurry, always too busy for long visits. "Tea? Coffee?" I offered, observing the formalities. "Nothing needed," he cut off and sat down in a chair without waiting for an invitation. I sat across from him, waiting for him to speak. Aldous stared at the floor as if gathering his thoughts. Finally, he looked up. "I didn't come to make peace, nor to apologize." "I didn't expect you to," I replied calmly. "You ruined my life," he continued bitterly. "I had everything. A beautiful family, a good job, respect from my colleagues, plans for the future. Now I have nothing. Absolutely nothing." "I'm not the one who ruined your life, Aldous," I said quietly. "You made the choices yourself that led to these consequences." "Choices?" He almost spit the word out. "What choice did I have? The bank wouldn't give me a loan because of that long-ago business incident. Della wanted a house in an upscale neighborhood. The kids wanted a better school. My colleagues looked down on anyone who didn't live in Richmond Hills. I had to do something. Had to live within my means," I replied. "Or find another way. An honest way. But you chose deceit. You forged my signature, took out a huge loan in my name, jeopardizing everything I have: my house, my savings, my future." "I was going to pay it all back," he objected. "Really?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Then why did you stop paying the loan right after the first installment? Why avoided me for weeks, knowing I'd get a delinquency notice? Why didn't he come to me and say, 'Dad, I'm in trouble, I can't pay the loan'?" Aldous looked away. "I was having temporary financial difficulties. I would have made it through. At the expense of my credit history? At the expense of jeopardizing my house? You knew that if you didn't pay, the consequences would fall on my shoulders." "Nothing would have happened to you." He raised his voice. "At most, it would have ruined your credit history. What do you need it for at your age? Are you going to buy a new house?" This was it. That's what Noah was talking about when he overheard his parents talking. Aldous had deliberately set me up, counting on the fact that, at my age, the consequences wouldn't be as bad. "This isn't about credit history," I said, feeling the anger rising inside. "It's about the fact that you used me, betrayed my trust, treated me not like a son to his father, but like a con man to his victim." "And what did you do to me?" Aldous suddenly blurted out. "Showed up at my housewarming party with a bailiff, humiliated me in front of all my friends and co-workers, made me look like a criminal. Do you have any idea what I had to go through after that?" "Did I have a choice?" I asked. "You avoided me for weeks, didn't return my calls, didn't show up when I asked to see you. What was I supposed to do? You could have handled it quietly, family style. You could have given me a chance to make things right. How could I trust you after what you did?" We fell silent, looking at each other across a chasm of mutual recrimination and misunderstanding. Then Aldous leaned back in his chair and said quietly, but with some underlying anger, "You know, you've always been like this, always putting your principles, your rules above everything else, above relationships, above family, above me." "What do you mean?" I was genuinely surprised. "About the way you raised me." His voice shook with barely contained emotion. "Always demanded perfect behavior, perfect grades, perfect everything. Never praise, only pointing out mistakes. When Mom died, you went completely into work, leaving me alone with my grief. Then Esther came along and you had Mira, your real daughter, your real child, and I was always in the background. I listened to him, stunned. Was that really how he perceived our relationship? That was not what I remembered. How I tried to give him the best, how I worked overtime to pay for his education, how proud I was of his successes. That's not true, Aldous, I said quietly. I loved you, always loved you, and I never made any distinction between you and Mira. You didn't? He grinned bitterly. And who did you help with the down payment on the apartment? Mira. Who did you support when there was a crisis? Mira. Who got a card from you for every birthday, even when she went to the other side of the world? Mira. I helped you too, I objected, many times. When you started your business, which then went bust, who gave you the money? When you and Della bought your first house, who helped with the renovations? It wasn't the same. Aldous pounded his fist on the armrest. You helped me reluctantly, with conditions, with notations, and to Mira, just out of the goodness of your heart. I shook my head. If you really felt that way, why didn't you ever talk about it? Why didn't you try to make light of the situation? Would you have heard? He looked at me with such desperation that for a moment I saw in him that little boy who had been left motherless at 5 years old. You were always so sure of your rightness, your moral superiority. You never really heard me. We fell silent again. Birds chirped outside the window. The sun shone through the curtains, creating patterns on the floor. A normal spring day, but for both of us, a moment when years of accumulated resentment and misunderstanding came to the surface. What do you want from me now, Aldous? I asked finally. He stood up, went to the window, looked out into the garden for a long time. I don't know. Probably nothing, I guess. I just wanted to tell you what you did to me. That you've ruined my life, not just now, with this loan scandal, but before, with your cold, demanding attitude. Did you ever think that maybe you misinterpreted my actions? I asked. That my being demanding was an act of caring, that I wanted a better future for you? Maybe, he shrugged. But what does it matter now? It's all done now. Everything's already broken. He turned to me, and I saw in his eyes not anger, but weariness, the endless weariness of a man who has lost and knows it. I'm leaving Winchester, he said. Got a job in Manchester. Not what it used to be, of course. A simple technician, not an engineer. But it's a chance to start again. Away from here, from these memories. And Della? The kids? Della filed for divorce. The kids? I'll see them when I can. But they've already made their choice to stay with their mother. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out and hug my son, tell him everything would be okay. But the other part realized that the gulf between us was too great, that some wounds wouldn't heal, some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. I wish you luck, Aldous, I said sincerely. I hope you find what you are looking for. He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to memorize my face. You know what the ironic thing is? I've wanted your approval my whole life, your pride. I wanted you to look at me and say, well done, son. And even that loan, that house, it was all part of that desire, to show you that I was successful, that I had accomplished something. I've always been proud of you, I said quietly, even when I didn't say it out loud. Aldous shook his head. It's too late for words like that, Dad. Too late for both of us. With those words, he headed for the exit. I walked him to the door and we stopped on the threshold, two men bound by blood but separated by life. Goodbye, Dad, he said without holding out his hand. Goodbye, son, I replied, feeling something finally break between us. He got in his car and drove away without looking back. I stood on the porch for a long time, looking out at the empty street, trying to make sense of everything I'd heard. Was I really the kind of father Aldous had described me as? Did my love and care come across as cold and demanding? Or was it just his way of justifying his actions, of shifting the blame? I did not know the answers to these questions. Perhaps they did not exist at all. Perhaps the truth lay somewhere in the middle, between my memories and his perception. Back in the garden, I sat down on a bench under an old apple tree. The day was clear, warm for early spring. In the feeder, which I had hung in the fall, the tits were swarming around, busily selecting seeds. Their simple, understandable life suddenly seemed so attractive to me. No complicated relationships, no resentments accumulated over the years, no betrayals and disappointments. Just the struggle for survival, the search for food, the continuation of the species. But we humans complicate everything. Our relationships, our feelings, our expectations. Everything becomes a battlefield where it's all too easy to hurt and be hurt. And sometimes, as in the case of Aldous and me, those wounds are too deep to heal. I thought about my son's words, about his accusations. Perhaps he was right about something. Perhaps I really hadn't always found the right ways to express my love. Perhaps, consumed with grief after Lorraine's death, I had failed to give little Aldous the comfort he needed. Perhaps my demanding seemed coldness to him, my caring seemed controlling. But that did not justify what he had done. It didn't justify his betrayal, his use of my name, his willingness to frame me for his own gain. And yet, sitting there under the apple tree, watching the birds and listening to them sing, I felt not anger or bitterness, but a strange calm. It was as if I had been carrying a heavy load all these months, and now I was finally able to let it go. Maybe that was the wisdom of old age, the ability to accept life as it is, with all its disappointments and losses. In realizing that some relationships can't be saved, some wounds can't be healed, some bridges remain burned forever. And it hurt, of course. It hurt to know that my only son left my life with resentment and bitterness, that my grandchildren would grow up away from me, perhaps with a distorted view of who I was and what happened between me and their father. But at the same time, I also felt relief. Relief that I no longer had to pretend, no longer had to turn a blind eye to manipulation and disrespect, no longer had to be used under the pretense of family ties. I ran my hand over the bench, feeling the familiar roughness of the wood beneath my fingers. It was the bench Esther and I had set up years ago when we'd first started the garden. She loved to sit here in the evenings, watching the sunset and telling me about her day. "What would you say now, dear?" I whispered, looking up at the sky. There was no answer. Only a light breeze moved the leaves overhead and a few petals from the apple tree in bloom dropped into my lap. I gathered them in the palm of my hand, examining the delicate pink color, a symbol of renewal and hope. Maybe that was the answer. In the continuation of life, no matter what, in the ability to see beauty even after loss, in the courage to start over even when it seems all is lost. I got up from the bench and walked back to the beds I'd been preparing before Aldous arrived. I knelt down, feeling the damp earth beneath my hands, the smell of nature awakening. Working in the garden had always brought me comfort, a sense of order and control in a chaotic world. And now, as I methodically prepared the soil for new plants, I thought about how maybe that's what it's all about. The ability to carry on, to create, to care, even when my heart is broken. In realizing that sometimes the most painful decisions are sometimes the most right ones, and that maybe now I can live my remaining years at peace with myself, without a fake relationship based on use. The birds continued to sing in the branches of the apple tree. The sun warmed my back, and life, against all odds, went on.